Welcome to Umbawa Radio, where we're dedicated to promotion of literacy and the advancement of authors and writers from unrepresented groups. I am your host, Simone, and today on our show, we have a very special guest, and she goes by author Tina Honey. Let me let you guys in on a little info about Tina Honey. Tina Honey is amazing. She has done some awesome things. She is, it's so many. I was so just over. Not, I don't want to say overwhelmed, but I just was so excited when I got a chance to see her bio and all the things that she has accomplished as an individual and also as an author. Let's start off with saying that she was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. Tina Honey is an information technology project manager by profession and the president and founder of Phoenix Experience, Inc., which is a community outreach organization located in Delray Beach, Florida, which serves as a platform for Tina's speaking engagements and workshops, where she leverages her life experiences and trainings as a certified professional life coach. Now, we're going to get into that, a lot more into that. We are going to talk about what led her to be an author and also, being a life coach. That's a pretty exciting job. Good evening, author Tina Honey.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm great. Just here a little rainy weather here in Louisiana, but otherwise I'm great. I'm excited when I got your information. I was really excited to see you have a beautiful the way you package yourself. It's just awesome. It's really beautiful. Love the pictures. I wish our listeners could see the pictures. Beautiful pictures.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. My first question, with the profession that you're in, I know listeners are wondering, how did you get from being an information technologist to an author? How did that happen? First of all, that's the first thing I'm curious about.
Well, Simone, actually, it's just living life. I would say when I was about 18, and for some people who have read the book and other people, I'm still trying to get it out there. This book is about adversity, and it's about that I was born into adversity and how I've been able to handle various adversities from that point forward. My story starts off because I was stolen at 3 months by my maternal grandmother and thrown into foster care. And from there, that's kind of where the story starts. My parents were 14 and 16 at the time. And so as I moved through life and ended up being an exotic dancer when I turned 18, and it was just so many things going on, Simone. What I said to myself in the parking lot one day, this sounds like a making of a good book. I might write about this one day. Never really thinking that I would actually write a book years later. But as time went on, and people would always reach out to me and ask me questions, and they would say, well, Tina, you give it so raw, you give it so unfiltered, you don't, give it the warm and fuzzy, you give a straight answer. And so that's just kind of how it went, and I decided, there's a lot of people that could learn from some of those lessons and adversities that I've been through and how I've been able to change negatives into positives. And so I decided, I need to get my story out there, and so I wrote the book.
Okay. How long when you that day in the parking lot, how long from that moment until you actually started writing that book? How long did it take you to actually get to the actual writing of that book?
I would say at least 20 years.
Oh my goodness, yeah. That is a while. You think it was? Maybe you said maybe this would make a good book one day. Do you think that fear kept you from maybe? A lot of people don't like sharing intimate details of their lives. You think that played into the 20
for
years?
Me. I'm literally an open book, and those people that know me know, oh, yeah, she really is an open book. It was more so, Simone, I was just living life. I had things going on that was constant back to back to back to back, and I had it in my head, and I would write things, throughout the years. I would write a journal, jot things down, but just life was going on. And so one day I was like, I really should write this down. And it took me another, I would kind of write it and stop writing, write it and stop writing. I just the problem was I couldn't figure out how to organize it. And there was a lady one day that I ran into. Her name is Dahlia Henry. I'll never forget because we were talking one day, and I said, I just can't figure out where to start. She said, quit trying to figure out how to organize it and just put it on paper. She said, that's what you have editors for. She said, just dump the information on paper. And I literally, in a week, I wrote it. Dumped everything, and then I pushed it off to the side and left it for another couple of years and said, you know, I'm frustrated now. I want to kind of get this story out. I really need to get this story out. And I went back and I edited and updating, you know, this back and forth. At the end of the day, it ended up, by the time I got all the right people in place to really get the story out, the whole process took me about 2 years, from finding the right editor, because many authors will know you have to find the right editor that understands your voice. I went through plenty of them who did not understand my voice, and I finally found one who understood my voice, and from there, it went from there.
Okay. And I'm saying, I've been doing a little research. In your book, you reveal being sexually assaulted at a very young age, and then again as an adult. Well, first of all, I want to commend you for that, because that's a hard thing to share with someone. What made you? What's the overall thing that pushed you to share that? Because you could have written the book easily and not have put that part in. What were you trying to? And a lot of times, I think when authors reveal things like that are so personal, that they're trying to maybe reach someone else that may have experienced the same trauma that they experienced. Was that your purpose behind that?
Yes, because what I've noticed is that a lot of people, and let me be clear, there are a lot of different types of sexual assault, and mine was not violent, meaning it wasn't at gunpoint, it wasn't at knife point, and I don't want to, make light of it, but mine was more of a date type sexual assault, a date rape. And I wrote it because so many people allow themselves to hold that negative experience back. They use that their whole life. They end up, letting that experience hold them back their whole life. And I wanted people to know, hey, you know what? It's okay to talk about it, deal with it, and move on. And I wanted people to see how I was able to deal with it, what I went through it twice, and how I was able to move past it. And don't let that hold you back in life.
And also, what are some of the other topics? And a lot of the topics that are expressed in your writing are actually things that people are dealing with now on the daily basis. What are some of the things that you address, topics that you addressed in your writing that happen in your life? What are some of the things that happen that you are putting in your writing?
So some of the things I talk about is, especially in the 80s and 90s, about running with the wrong crowd. Basically, I was this kid from a middle class neighborhood. My parents was in church. It seemed like for a little kid, it seemed like it was every day. Mm-hmm. And so basically, I'm saying here I am, this middle class kid who had hood-like experiences, mm-hmm. but did not fall into that. I didn't allow the experiences that I had to allow it to shape who I am today. So I could have easily failed. I'm running around with drug dealers and drug dealers who selling drugs, and I literally could have been in jail. But I didn't let that type of thing pull me in. I kept moving forward because I knew that I had to finish school. The education was very high on my parents' list, and I knew that there was no question. You were going to go and get an education and move forward. So, I just talk about these different things that I've ran into, rape. I used to be an exotic dancer. I know a lot of exotic dancers that they did not move forward. They allowed that street life to grab them and keep them where they are. I kept going. I used that as a means to get to the next step.
I understand. Well, let me ask you this. You mentioned earlier, and I also, you mentioned earlier that you were stolen as an infant and you were placed into foster care by your maternal grandmother.
Yes.
This is a two-part question I have referring to that. First of all, were you ever placed, you said your parents were really young, were you ever placed back into their lives? And part two of that question is, how did that part of your life, that happened to you, how did that affect you?
So the first answer is I was never placed back into my birth parents' home.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a chance to meet them years later, and that's in a whole different book, but I'll just give you a tidbit that I did have a chance to meet them. I had found out they had been looking for me all those years, but based on how the laws were in that time, you weren't able to reach out to me. They were going to have to wait till I became an adult. Hopefully I knew and reached back out to them. How it affected me, I'll tell you, growing up, adults don't always think that kids hear people talk. And so growing up in the church, adults are talking, kids are listening. And so as I started getting older and started noticing I didn't really look like my adoptive parents, kids would kind of tease me. Mm-hmm. And so that made me look at them like, oh, well, whatever, because I don't care what you're saying. I just can't, I guess, kind of got this tough exterior and was not going to let anybody, make me feel bad about a situation that I wasn't really even clear and understanding about. I really didn't even finally know that I was adopted, like proof, until I was about 17, 18, and I wanted to go to the Marines. And a recruiter asked me for my birth certificate, and I was too scared to ask my parents for the birth certificate. And he says, are you sure your mom and dad were married? I can't find it. And that's when it really was proof to me that I was adopted, and I tried to address it to my parents at the time, and they just was not trying to hear it. So, but see, I think I was blessed because I was blessed with two sets of parents. I have my adoptive parents, and then as I got older and had a chance to meet my birth parents, then I was able to meet those parents. And so I feel I was blessed because I was, I have two sets of parents. I have parents that raised me, and now that my adoptive parents have passed on, I still have my birth parents around that I talk to.
Yeah, truly, it is a blessing. Many children don't get that opportunity to meet those birth parents, and it's definitely a blessing. This is your first book, and it's a part of a trilogy.
Yes.
So I try every time that I interview a different author every Sunday, I try to find out what type of advice you give to someone that maybe, may have written a book and just afraid to get it out there. Or, what is your advice to an up-and-coming author, someone that's not released yet, but they have their manuscript, but they just don't know what to do with it, or that that fear of letting it go and maybe not feeling as if it won't do well, it won't be well received. What would be your advice?
I would say just do it. A lot of people, when I was going through this process of writing the book, as you know, there's a lot of things in that book. There's sex, there's rape, there's, just so many things in that book. And a lot of people, try to get me to change and say, oh, but you mean this, or don't say it this harshly. I said, no, I want to say it the way I want to say it. And once you have determined for yourself that you're willing to tell the world your story, and you don't care how they judge you, because I don't care if somebody judges me. I went through what I went through. My story is my story. People can either like it or they don't. And that person who's scared to tell their story, they have to determine when they're ready to let the world know that they're about their story. And then once you do it, just do it. Once you make that decision, you just do it. Put it on paper and go through the process of getting the right team with you, finding editors, find your proofreaders, find all the right people to help you move forward. I had I call her she kept me off the ledge because there were so many times that I wanted to turn from this process. Her name's Nadej, and she literally kept me off the ledge because there's many times there's many times that you just want to stop. Mm-hmm. Because it's hard. But if it was easy, everybody would do it. Isn't that how it goes?
Exactly. I agree. I see that I want to ask you, you went through a publishing company, and I'm thinking you are the first author that I've come across that on this show that has done that.
Huh?
Most of them are self-published.
The difference with Plant a Seed
I thought you said
is
chicken.
he is a
I'm sorry, Pam.
independent. He is an independent publishing company. So it's kind of like instead of struggling by yourself, this publishing company kind of gives you the structure of how to do it without you just being out there flapping in the wind by yourself. So I still own everything, but I was able to get the developmental editor. Jesse Jackson is the developmental editor that I first met with, and he was the one that saw the vision and was able to understand my voice. And we worked together for a year until we got it to the point that I was then ready to move on to the next editor.
Okay. And most when we talk about a lot of times with being an author on the marketing and the branding of yourself and of what you're doing and your message, or is that something that you are doing yourself, or you have this a part of something that your team does?
Well, I did it with, like I said, what I would consider my consultant, Nadej. I had a vision. She has a vision, and I worked with her to help bring all that together. Because you need to be able to bounce ideas off of somebody that you really trust. And you need somebody to tell you no if they don't think it's a good idea. You don't need yes people around you. You need people who are looking out for your best interest. There was another lady, Olivia. She went to college with me, and she was part of that team, part of that initial building and direction and helping me move forward. Because you just can't do this by yourself. It's hard. You need someone to talk to. You need somebody around you.
Exactly. You do. You have to have people on your team that are going to tell you what is what and be honest with you. That's the most important thing. And I agree with you on that completely. I do see this, that you are a life coach.
Yeah, so I kind of fell into that. That wasn't something that I said, hey, I'm going to, I didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a life coach. I kind of fell into it because throughout the years, as people get to know me, they know, like I said earlier, that I will give you the straight answer. I won't sugarcoat it. I don't always give you the answer that you think you're going to get. I don't always give the answer that, oh, that's a girly answer and she's always going to side with the woman. No, sometimes I side with the men, and sometimes I say both of y'all wrong. And so as people would come to me about different scenarios in their life, and they knew that I had been through different scenarios, I started giving this advice. And I started noticing that I was doing this over some time, over, 10, 20 years. And I said, well, wait a minute. I didn't really know what it was called, but I said, well, I need to figure out how to, market this, how to make money off of this. I'm giving advice away for free. But I just like to help people. I like helping people. And if I can help somebody, whether I get paid or not, that's what I do.
Okay. Well, tell our listeners a little bit about your organization that you use as your platform. I'm curious about it, especially the names that Phoenix. I can kind of guess at what the reasoning behind Phoenix Experience Inc. Tell us a little bit about Phoenix Experience Inc.
So Phoenix Experience started because one day I was sitting around and I was trying to figure out the scenarios that I've been through, and I was trying to figure out a name for my company. And it dawned on me that every time you go through an adversity, you go through that storm and you figure out how to move forward and learn the lessons from that storm, you're actually reborn. And that's where Phoenix Experience was born, because every scenario and story in my book and all the books that will be coming in the future is really a Phoenix experience, how I've gone through something, I've burned up, and I've been reborn, and I've started all over again. Not necessarily in the same spot, but further ahead and smarter. So that's where Phoenix Experience, from that mythical bird, being constantly reborn each time you go through an adversity and learning from that and moving forward.
Oh, I know a little bit something about that. That Phoenix, you would be blown away if I tell. Well, I'm going to say it because anybody that's listening that knows me, I've had some adversity myself, and actually that's what I'm called. but not Phoenix, but She Phoenix.
Ah, very
That
nice.
is my
Very nice.
yes. Yeah, so I know when I figured that had to be what it was, but I wanted you to share that with our listeners. You know, a lot of times people go through things and they don't look back, and you know they always dwell on the going through part, but they never go in and speak of after you've gone through and you've risen above all of that. And you come back from, I see so many people do that. They come back from something, but they'll never say, you know, but I came back. I overcame it. Never, you know, it's always on the part of on the low end of it. And I just love the fact that with your organization, and you have an opportunity to get out there and you get to speak about that, especially with our young ladies.
Yes.
If you know, our young ladies, and I'm not saying that our young men need it, but I think our young ladies, and I'm going to say this, our young ladies in the African-American community especially need more women like yourself that are willing to share their experiences and the adversities that they've come up against. And then, you know, if they look at you and see how strong you are and how you've overcome them, they know that I can do this too. So that's one of the things as I go through your bio and I look at your information, I think that's a plus for that. And I just want to commend you for that first off before we go any farther.
Thank you.
You are so welcome. You know, let me ask you this: if someone wants to get Tina Honey, how many are you often? Some people do tours. Do you do book signings? Have you done any book signings as of late? You have any coming up, or?
I haven't did any as of yet. I'm looking into, there's a couple of book conferences coming up in Chicago and New York. I'm looking into do those. I definitely have to get to Detroit first, get my hometown, and Atlanta. I went to Morris Brown College, so I got to stop off in Atlanta, all my friends and family there. But I am definitely looking to put together a schedule, and I will post it on my website. My website is www.tinamhoney.com. There you can also find my social media. I'm on Facebook, author Tina M. Honey. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at Tina M. Honey. So there's plenty of different ways. If you want me to come to your city, I'll definitely come there for a book signing. So please contact me there. But I am definitely looking to put together a schedule this year and start getting out more.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna go to a whole other aspect of this interview. I want to know, who inspires Tina Honey? Someone that is an individual that is famous and an individual that is not famous. Who are those individuals that inspire you?
That's funny because I get that question often, and it took me a while to think about it. And one day it came to me, and my answer is not going to be what you think it would be. My answer is I inspire myself. I have no desire to be like anybody else except for me.
Mm-hmm. Somehow I expected that out of you. Somehow I expected that out of you. I don't know.
I literally, that question has been asked of me for several years, especially when I was going through the whole writing process. And there are women that I like, and I like their strength and this, that, and the other. But when you say who really inspires me, I don't get inspiration from someone else. I get it from myself.
I expected that. To be honest, I really expected you to say that. And just in our little brief conversation here, I expected that. And that's a point well taken. That's a point well taken. I would, are you looking to do anything? You may be already doing this. Are you working with any young ladies or young people in your community to possibly help them to excel in something, or mentoring somewhere along those lines? Are you doing anything like that in your community?
So in the past, I would say last year, because this year has been a little hectic for me. Last year, I used to do a lot of volunteering for domestic violence, women of domestic violence in 2 counties. I live in Delray Beach, so there's an area called Broward County and Palm Beach County, and there's 2 organizations that I had volunteered for over the past couple of years. This year just got so busy for me, and I had to pull back. But I'm looking to look at other areas of how my talent, my strengths, my skill set can be used. So, I'm looking to try to make some type of program that I can move forward to that really is going to make a difference.
And yeah, that's something that that is needed in every community. It's something that we can make a difference in the lives of young people. Because as flaky as it may sound, they are our future, and we have to do something. And I can't say enough, but not just young people, but in the African American community, the inner city areas. We have to get in there and start making a difference in the lives of these young people. My next question is this. How did you come up with the title for that book? That's what I was.
So, my last name is Honey, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a conversation. I think I was like 18, and I wrote about this. I worked at the health club Big Tanny.
Mm-hmm.
There was a young lady that I met, and that's kind of, I talk about in the book how I kind of got into the whole dancing thing. And I remember the conversation I had to her, and I said, hey, if we're going to do this, let's not get sucked in and let the money make us. And, we talked, and she said, yeah. And so it took me about a year when I decided to write the book. And I sat around, and I thought, and I tried to figure out what would be a good book, and then a good title. And then it just came to me. Honey, make that money, don't let it make you. And that's exactly what my book is about, is how go out there and do what needs to be done, but don't get sucked into it. Don't get sucked into the bad side of it, the negative side of it. Do what you have to do. I was trying to get my degree. So I was not trying to live in the club forever. I just needed to get paid so I could pay my bills so that I could get my degree and move on to the next phase of my life.
Yeah, and like you say, a lot of people get caught up in that life and that world, and they never escape it. And I can understand that. I get the title, and I kind of figured that was it. You have two children, am I correct?
Yes, I do. Yes, two boys.
Two boys.
Yes.
And they're teenagers?
They are 22 and soon to be 19.
You have two men.
Yes.
I'm saying boys. You have two men. Okay. I tell them I apologize. I thought for some reason I thought they were younger. And have they read your book?
They have not read it. However, when I started writing the book, there were parts of my life that they didn't know about. So I had a conversation with them, and I told them. I used to be a dancer. I told them, a lot of different things. I told them about, rape. And I told them because I never wanted them to be in a position that, what if one day one of their friends happened to pick the book up and read it and then run back and say, hey, I read this about your mom. I don't like people to be, surprised. So I told them, basically, but because they're boys, they're like, whatever, Mom, okay. And they kept it moving. They were just uninterested. But they said they were proud of me that I had, wrote a book and published it. And when I first started advertising, my sons would put it on their little Facebook and their Instagram and Snapchat and whatever else, the young folks do today. Mm-hmm. But they have not read it. I'm not sure if they're interested in reading it, but it's around. If they wanted to read it, they could.
Okay. What about the adoptive parents? How did they receive you writing this book?
It was great. I talked to both. Well, let me rephrase. You said adoptive, so I was going to talk about my birth parents. My adoptive parents have passed, so
okay.
They didn't know. But I would say, truthfully, I probably wouldn't have written the book had they still been alive, because they were of a different era. Mm-hmm. And that era is, hey, you keep everything inside the house. You don't tell nobody nothing. Keep secrets.
Yeah.
It was from that era. And in that era, that's why there are so many people with problems, because everything is secret.
Swept under the rug.
Swept under the rug. Let's not tell anybody. I can say specifically that when I presented to my parents that I was going to look for my adoptive parents, they were not happy. for my birth parents, they were not happy. They literally said, my mom literally said, had I known that this was going to happen, I don't think I would have went through the adoption. Because they didn't understand that I wasn't saying I don't love you. They didn't understand that. I wanted to know, who was I? Who did I look like? I wanted to know my history, not their history. Because for years I had been walking around talking about the history of my adoptive parents, not really knowing that it was my adoptive parents and not actually my history.
Exactly. And I've had friends that were adopted, and they have similar stories. A lot of times, the adopted parents have and I wouldn't say necessarily. I don't know if we're from the same era or not. But my friends, I'm 46 years old, but and people would have come from the era of my mother. My mother was born in the mid 40s, but they, like you say, they are from a different era, and they have a hard time accepting that need or that want that you have. And I can say this: I wasn't adopted, but I was raised by my mother. She was a single parent, and my mother didn't understand this. And I didn't know my dad. I didn't know my father. And when I got to be a teenager, I had this longing of, you want to know. I wanted to know who he was and where he was, and that would upset her to the highest. And I can understand where she just would be so upset. And even after I found him and I knew where he was and I knew where he lived, if I dealt with my father, I had to keep it to a secret from my mother.
Right.
Because she would get so irate and so upset with me, but she couldn't understand it. And, you knew your father. You were around your dad. I was not. As a child, and especially a female, wanted to, you always, as I've seen written and I've read so many times, your father is supposed to be the first love of your life is your dad. And see, I didn't have that growing up as an adolescent. And my mother, and I think it's because of her feelings about him, she did not want me to have that relationship. So I understand. I wasn't adopted, but, kind of a similar situation to be an adult woman in her 30s and early 40s, sneaking around, sniffing and hiding to visit and see her father. And, because if I didn't, I would have a confrontation with my mother. Or she'd think, I loved her less because of that. So I understand, that situation. There's a lot of children going through that, even as adults, middle age, going through that. If they've been adopted or one parent they grew up with and didn't grow up with the other. So I can understand that. And, again, your story can be such a light for individuals going through that, just not adolescents, but even someone my age could do that. But this is like I say, the plot thickens, and you have a good relationship with your birth parents. I can tell by the conversation that you've gotten. Do you have other siblings?
Yes, it was 6 of us in total.
Oh, my goodness.
Two have passed, and so let me say first, I didn't really understand it until my adoptive parents passed. I didn't really understand the relationship that we had. But we had a good relationship. It was just a different time period, if you understand what I'm saying. They showed love, but they didn't show love in the way that we talk about love today, saying I love you and hug you and all that kind of stuff. But they showed love. When I met my birth parents, it took a minute for me to get used to it because they showed love with the hugs and the kisses and the, constantly telling you that I love you before you get off the phone. And I was like, what? That was so odd to me. Because that was, it took me a minute. My sisters and stuff, they're hugging me, and I'm looking at them like, what? I'm not accustomed to all of this. So it took a minute, but when I was writing the book, I spoke with both my mom and dad and got a clear understanding of the backstory, because I had heard the story several different times, but I had not just clearly went step by step to understand exactly how I got there and what was going on with Grandma and that whole situation. So before I wrote the book, that first piece, I did a lot of research with my mom and dad to really understand and make sure I told their story, because their story is a story within itself, because it's a love story.
Oh my goodness! And I know this has gone away from what we're doing because I love when you say a love story. That piqued my interest. They remained together after you were born.
Oh yeah, there were six more of us. There were six more of us after me. So.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So they never married.
Okay.
But and somewhere down the road they ended up breaking up.
Mm-hmm.
But to this day, my dad has gotten remarried and has more kids. Whatever, it's 10 of us all together as far as siblings and step siblings. But to this day, my dad 100% respects my mother. No matter who he's married to, he respects my mother.
It was a beautiful story. That, like I said, that's a story. Like you said, that's a story within itself.
Yeah, that's a story within itself. He will always look out for my mother, no matter what.
Beautiful story. And this is another thing that I always want my listeners to listen to, hear, and then to understand about when you are a author. A lot of them think when you write a book, it's instant. You know, that book is going to be an instant bestseller. And it's not always about. You know, it depends on, I guess, the subject, the topic of the book. It's almost never that it's going to be a bestseller according to different criteria of different labels that are given for bestsellers. What
right.
can you give an author? Sometimes when they do, I've noticed, especially here locally, if that book does not do what they believe in their hearts that it should do, what can be your advice to an up-and-coming author, first-time author, you know, when they're putting that book out there? What can you tell them, you know, about not becoming discouraged, you know, that there's a second, third, fourth, fifth, or whatever, even 10th book in them, to not let that, you know, your purpose has to be, but the book that I wrote and I released, my purpose behind the book wasn't about being a bestseller. For me, it was more like therapy. It was my way of sharing with other women that may have experienced the things that I had experienced, and may make other people understand women that had experienced that. So, you know, that was my purpose. But if your sole purpose is becoming a bestseller, what would be your advice if it does not? You know, how do you keep going after that?
I would say if your sole purpose was to become a bestseller, then you don't need to start, because you can't predict your followers. I talk to people all the time. I may post something on my Instagram account, and it may be what I think is nothing, and everybody's crazy about it. And then I may post something that's like some serious, deep thought, and everybody's like, whatever. So I didn't write the book to think that I was going to be famous on day one. I keep my day job because I like my day job. I wrote the book because I wanted people to hear my story, because I felt people could learn from the lessons that I've been through. And if it helps one person, then as far as I'm concerned, I'm a bestseller. Sometimes it doesn't, people don't recognize who you are until, like you said, you're 10 books down. And then they go back and say, well, wait a minute, this author is pretty good. What was the first book they wrote? And then 10 years later is when your first book that you wrote 10 years ago all of a sudden becomes a big seller. You're like, oh, yeah, that thing's been out for a while. So you gotta have your own reasons for writing the book, and you can't write the book because you think you're going to get rich quick, because that's just not going to always work. It does happen for some, and it doesn't happen for others.
Exactly.
And you can have a very well-written book, but until somebody reads it and start telling their friends, then that's when it kind of spreads. But a lot of times books just sit on the shelf until one person happened to read it one day and tell somebody else and say, hey, you know what, you should go read this book.
And I agree. And that has happened before. It happens over and over again with books. And, you know, I know that this first book is a part of a three-part series, but after you complete that last book, then what?
I have so many more books in my head. I have a book about my menopausal journey, because that's another topic that people don't talk about. And that's a topic back in the day where grandmas would say, oh, you just deal with it, you do with this and do that. And so I'm going to talk about my journey. And no, I don't want to just deal with it. I'm going to see if I can figure out the issue. I'm head into it. I don't want to hide it. And so I want to talk about that journey. I have a book. It's a trilogy book, but I decided to just kind of make it a book of love stories, but it's maybe like 5 or 6 love stories, and it talks about the different loves that I've been through. Mm-hmm. But of course, you know that it's not going to end the way most love stories end. You know, my personality is going to have a different kind of twist on it, and it's not going to be in the manner that most people are accustomed to a love story. And I have a book in my head about being a single parent. Mm-hmm. Of course, that's not going to end the way most people think that it would end, and it's not going to give the type of advice that everybody's all warm and fuzzy and like to say things that's socially nice to say. No, I say things that people think, but they don't want to say it. I say it.
In other words, you're like my grandmother. You don't keep it 100. You keep it 1,000.
Right.
You know, she was. You know, she's not going to sugarcoat anything. It is what it is.
It is what it is, and if people, I think that if people quit lying to people, people will be much better.
Oh my goodness, you are right. I grew up hearing that. Yeah, it's true. They're much better off. You know, when you it's so much better. You know, so to tell the truth, it may not be as pretty, or you know, fluffed up, or what. It's not pretty at all. But you know, sometimes the truth is the best medicine in the world for somebody, for everybody.
It allows you to deal with it and move on instead of somebody constantly telling you one thing and it's really something totally different, and you're never able to have an opportunity to deal with it.
Exactly. And that causes so many other issues and problems with people. And, you know, that's what the great thing about writers and authors and speakers like yourself. I think we need more like you. They're able to reach people on a different level. And, you know, sometimes when people may, you know, someone may ask me my opinion, they may not take what I'm saying, but when people look at an individual like yourself, and, you know, you have experience under your belt in so many different areas and topics of life, so many things, you've come up against so much, you know, and they're typically more to accept it from you than they would from me. And, you know, that's a great thing, and I continue to push people to share their life experiences and, you know, things that they've come up against and they've overcome. Now, sometimes we don't overcome everything, but, you know, sometimes we have to, it's a journey. It's a journey. It's a constant thing that we're going through, and hopefully sometimes, you know, we can get to that point where we've worked through enough to where I say we can live with it or deal with it. But we know it's there. You know, we're constant work. You know, we're just a constant building on who we are. We're forever changing. Some people say, you know, we don't change, but we're always changing. We're constantly changing. We're changing our viewpoints, the way that we live, the way that we think, the way that we feel. We're a constant work. I say a work art. You know, that's what I look at. Yeah, we're a work of art. We're a work of art, but we're constantly evolving. And we're changing. Exactly. And, you know, and that's the way we should be. If you stay stuck in that same way of thought, that same way of doing things, then there's no change for you. And that's what I want people to change. It, not change. All the time they say change, but I don't always change for the worse, but to change and evolve for the better. And that's how I think we can move on in our lives, and we're able to help others move on also. And if you're speaking in your life, being a life coach, and you do these workshops, what are some of the topics of the workshops that you do? You know, I would love to know just what are some of the, you know, as far as being a life coach, what are some of the things that you use in your company, you know, at that platform? What are some of the things that you talk about in your workshops? What are some of the topics?
Well, that kind of leads into something I was going to talk about. Step back just for a second when you were talking about, because I have so many vast topics that I have gone through, that has been the hardest part when people typically ask an author, well, who's your audience? And once they figure it out, they can either say it's young, it's old, it's boy, it's girl, it's man or woman. I have so many topics that it's been hard to figure out who is my audience. My audience is everybody.
Yeah.
If anybody and everybody really, and I have been constantly people try to push me into a category, but I'm really not in that norm category. Once again, I'm doing it my way.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And again, because I have so many topics, when people ask me to come to speak, I try to narrow the topic down. I try to understand what type of audience they have, and what type of topic would best benefit them. Because again, I can talk about sex, I can talk about rape, I can talk about drugs, I can talk about education. It's just across the board. I can talk about adoption, I can talk about foster care, I can talk about love. So I have so many topics to talk about. I can talk about domestic violence. I've been through that as well. I wrote about some of that in the book as well. So it's just so many topics that I can't just say, hey, this is the best topic or this is the only topic. I try to cater that to the type of audience, and then I can determine which topics that would best benefit that audience.
Yeah, and because you cover so many different areas, oh my goodness, the discussions could go on forever. With just a few things that you have talked about in this interview, this is. Let me say this. Let me ask you this question. There's so many things in my head that I want to ask. But this particular question, if you had a choice and you could narrow it down, what group, what demographic would be your choice?
I would go with men and women, because before I put this book out, I did a pilot group, and I had men and women read it. And the biggest feedback I got was from men, because most men don't like to read. Most, not all. But most men don't like to read. But a lot of the feedback I got from the men was that, oh, my God, I think this is an excellent book. I've never really gotten through a whole book, and I've read this whole book. I was so excited because it had so many twists and turns. And I got a lot of feedback that if there were teenagers who were mature enough and open enough to understand the message that I'm giving, some have suggested, hey, you should go and speak to high schoolers. I had someone else that suggested I should talk to college students. Definitely that age of 20 through 40 is a definite group, men and women, who could understand and learn and understand where I come from. So, again, your question is hard to narrow it down, but if I had to choose, I would say the group millennials, that early 20s and 30s. Not that the older group can't get anything out of it, but maybe, just maybe, if those 20 and 30-year-olds read my book and understood and learned from the lessons that I did, maybe they wouldn't do some of the same mistakes that I made.
Exactly. I agree wholeheartedly about that. It is, that is something that it's hard to choose. I just want to see that you have a preference, even though there's many that you could see. I just want to see if you had a preference, and I would say I would agree to millennials, because that is the purpose. It's almost like parenting. We're constantly trying to save our children from repeating our history of things that we've been through, things that we've done. And, sometimes it's so hard to get them to see. And I think a lot of times they believe that we're trying to keep them from something or keep them from doing something or experiencing something. But I've learned to kind of, if I can't get you to see it, then I have to let you experience it. And maybe after a few experiences, you'll figure out, well, Mama knows. Mama's been there. So
right.
I've learned to, step back a little bit and let you experience life a little bit.
Exactly. Some of the other questions I've gotten before as I was going through this journey, and some people have read the book, they asked me, would I have ever changed anything that I went through? Would I change anything? And I said, absolutely not. And they said, what do you mean? They said, you wouldn't want to change the fact that you were raped? You wouldn't want to change the fact, all these different things. And I said, absolutely not. I said, because if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be who I am today. I may not have the same strength, the same experience, the same knowledge, the same ability to share a story to help someone else go through that experience and help them understand the positive. I would not be who I am today had I not went through those adversities. And I feel that's my journey, that God has put me here to be able to help others get through negative adversities and show them how they can get through it and turn it into a positive experience. And so I feel like I constantly go through these various storms in order to understand it, realize it, and then put it in words to help someone else. And the funny thing about that is that originally I wanted to be a psychiatrist. So full circle, 360, and it was something Oprah said one day when she said, you know, you start off on road A, and you really wanted to go, well, really, you end up on road C, but you wanted to go down road A. Well, I wanted to be a psychiatrist. I ended up in IT. I'm a project manager, so technically I'm still a therapist, because if you understand anything about project management, you need communication and you need therapy to help your team get to where they need to get to. And full circle, I am a psychiatrist just in a different way. I'm a psychiatrist, but I'm willing to tell my story to help other people get through their adversities.
Oh, my goodness. And that is so true. Things have a way of working themselves out even without us knowing. That first thought, sometimes we try to get away from, I don't know if you tried that or not, but sometimes we try to do things a certain way to get away from something that we don't think that we should be doing or we are qualified to do. And we always end up right back to where, at that point where we're actually doing it, maybe call something else like you said, but it is what it is. And it's such a great thing. Have you, you haven't had a book signing, but in your speaking, as you said, you've had different people to ask you who your demographic is. Have you actually did some speaking somewhere maybe in your city or outside of your city as of late?
I haven't did it as of late, but I actually did some prior to me publishing the book. And it was to women in the domestic violence home. And it was about career choice, resumes, getting them prepared to go back into the workforce, into the corporation and find a job, because they've been through so many things. They didn't know how to write a resume. They didn't know how to conduct themselves in an interview. They didn't know how to dress. So to me, that was still giving back, because here are these women who have been through so many things and still going through psychologically so many things, but they didn't even know how to do basics. And so I spoke to a number of women in a seminar. We did a workshop, actually. We made it a working workshop where we went through and wrote resumes and did mock interviews and things of that nature.
Okay. Do you believe that all the things that you've done, not just your experiences and your adversities, but all the things you've done, like the workshop and being a part of your community and doing things, even with you saying being a project manager, all of these things collectively, have you think they've made you a better writer, a better author? You think that all that was a contribution to where you are now as far as being an author?
I believe so. I didn't study writing a book before I wrote the book. I wrote clearly from my heart and from my experience, and I really wanted people to read the book and feel like they were there experiencing the experiences as I was experiencing it.
I understand. Writing that book, you wanted them to. Were you able to write in a manner to where, when you're reading chapter by chapter, your reader is living that book with you? And because I got that feeling from when you said the men, like you said, if you can capture a man to read a whole book, and it's not saying that you said that men don't read.
Right.
But they are less likely to read than a woman, in most times. But for you to be able to hold the attention of say, that particular group, and for them to tell you that, so you're able to capture them in your writing, and you said you didn't study writing. You know, this is your first book. So it goes back to, again, to me say this, being able to pour yourself into this. And a lot of times, and I've read books about people here locally that I know who are quote unquote memoirs. But in knowing them and reading the books, I know that you haven't poured yourself and you haven't been completely honest. So in saying that, you are one of those rare authors that are able to be completely honest. You didn't sugarcoat it. You just told it like it is. You didn't build it up to be something that it wasn't. You just wrote about you. And that's what's going to make it successful in what you're doing. It's going to come across all groups, all demographics, because you were able to share and you were able to, give who you are. You put all of Tina Honey into that book. You didn't hold back. And a lot of times they do that. Yeah, they hold back. Yeah. And I know they've held back because a lot of local authors here, I've known them probably pretty much all of my life, and I know you've left things out and you've not gone as far as you can go. And a lot of times a reader can pick up on that. I know I can. Right. I know when something is not being all of it. If you're playing it off as a memoir, I know that you haven't shared the entire story.
Exactly.
Because I've been there and I've been a part of your life enough to know. So that is why you are, and just not the millennials or just not men and women. You'll reach across demographics with your book, because it's simply this: it's about life, and life happens.
Yes.
And you've lived your life, and I admire you for that. A lot of people don't live life; they're afraid to live life. I just wanted you to be able to go back and just share with our listeners, because it's coming to an end. Even though I could go on and on tonight, but I want you to go back and share with our readers how they can get a copy, how they can get you if their organization or their women's group or their book club wants Tina Honey to come out and share with them and, do a book talk, do a book signing and motivate them if they want to be coached in life. How can they do that?
They can go to my website, www.tinamhoney.com. There you will see my contact information. You can email me and reach out if you want me to do a book signing or speak at an engagement. I'm also, you can order the book on the site. I have an ebook and paperback. Currently right now, if you're ordering the paperback, I sign it for you. I autograph it for you and drop it in the mail. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram, and that handle is @TinaMHoney, and I'm also on Facebook, author Tina M. Honey. Email me, any of those availabilities, any of those social media sites. You can email me and reach out to me, and we'll go from there.
It has been awesome. I've really, really enjoyed speaking with you, and I know our listeners have really enjoyed you being able to share with you. You're so open and really willing to share with us your thoughts and about your book and the process of getting there and all your adversities, and that's something we really enjoy here on Umbawa Radio, that even the author is an open book. So I am going to close out this evening. This is another Sunday here at Umbawa Radio. We've had an awesome conversation with author Tina Honey, and we have enjoyed it, to no end. She has an awesome book that's out. I want you guys to go out and purchase it, and go online and purchase it. As she said, it's a memoir, and it's the first of 3. So she's on the first one. We have 2 more to expect, and the first one is Honey, Make That Money, Don't Let It Make You. So go out and get the real story about what happened with author Tina Honey. Thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully we'll get a chance to speak when you drop that second book.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a good evening.
Okay. Bye.